at Stocktoberfest with another Stocktoberfest executive interview. I'm here with Katie Wheeler, head of partnerships at ONDO Finance, a really exciting company that's bridging these two worlds of traditional finance, decentralized finance. Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. The conference has been great so far.
Amazing. Well, what you're doing is very much in the news. I think a lot of us are hearing about these big institutions partnering up with companies like yours, perhaps investing sometimes. Let's back up a second and talk about the infrastructure that you guys are building at ONDO Finance and what is the services that you're offering to the people you're working with.
Yeah, ONDO Finance is a leader in tokenization of real-world assets. We have about $1.8 billion in TVL, total value locked, or assets under management. We are the leader in tokenized equities and ETFs, and we build both the platforms, the assets, and the infrastructure to support these assets on public blockchains.
Okay, let's talk about real-world assets, because that is a word, I feel like if we looked at the Google trends, it would just be going up and up in the last few months to year. How would you define what a real-world asset is when we talk about this in the context of DeFi?
Probably the easiest thing for people to understand is the first RWA, or real-world asset, that found product market fit is the stablecoin. So if you've heard of Tether's USDT or Circle's USDC, there's about $300 billion of stablecoins. They're basically just digital dollars. So you take a dollar, physical dollar, you put it in a bank, and then they issue a digital dollar that freely trades across public blockchains. That market, $300 billion, is only 1% of M2 money supply. So it's still very small, but it's starting to catch on. And now that you have all of these, stable coins on a public blockchain, people are now using that as a gateway to investing in other assets. So you can invest in Treasuries to get yield. You can invest in equities or ETFs to get exposure to a high yield fund, or silver or gold, obviously, is also having a big moment right now.
Fascinating. So let's talk about ETFs, because we have a lot of ETF issuers here. When you're talking to these issuers and they're thinking about potentially bringing things that they're building on chain, what is the value prop or the benefit to a traditional ETF issuer to think about that?
I would say the number one advantage is access, right? A lot of people outside of the United States don't have access to US capital markets. It's hard for them to invest in an S&P 500, a high yield fund, tokenize different private precious metals like gold and silver. And so similar to a stablecoin, right? People outside of the US have always wanted access to the dollar. Maybe they live in a country that has hyperinflation or there's capital controls, right? You can have a peg to the dollar, which allows you to actually continue to preserve your wealth. Now that people understand how a digital dollar works, now they're trying to get yield, they're trying to invest, and they're trying to build generational wealth. And so it's a new access play for a lot of ETF issuers.
So that's ETF issuer. What about if you're a CFO or an IR team for a single stock? Because we've heard Robinhood's CEO talking about tokenized assets. They had a big event in Europe talking about that. Is that a similar sort of advantage benefit model for a single stock of an IR team thinking about bringing potentially their ticker on chain?
Exactly. It's a brand new market. We work with a lot of emerging market countries like Philippines, Turkey, Argentina. A lot of these people have digital wallets, and that's how they do banking, right? They're not going to a broker. They live on chain. And so it's really a whole new demographic that you could access to, both from like a younger generation who maybe have never even stepped foot in a bank. And once you have an internet connection, it's really quite easy to access a lot of these products.
And the technology you're building, it feels like it's flexible in a way where this could apply to ETFs, it could apply to stocks. What else is the industry or are you all at ONDO thinking about, and other things or assets that could be tokenized and brought on chain?
Yeah, so as you said before, real world assets is a very broad term, right? There's people who are tokenizing whiskey collections, art, soybeans. It's really, you can leverage the technology across a lot of different asset classes. At ONDO, we focus only on the financial instruments. And our thesis is you should always start with the most liquid and publicly traded assets. So we work a lot in the Treasury space, the equities, ETF space, because there's already a lot of liquidity in the traditional markets. And now we're just trying to bring them on chain. There's other people who are taking the stance that it could disrupt private equity, real estate, other hard assets. But really for ONDO, we're focused on financial assets that trade publicly.
And financial assets, obviously there's a lot of hurdles with compliance and SEC. And I'm curious, at a high level, the questions you get from partners when you have these conversations, are there any common topics they bring up or myths that need to be debunked when you're talking them through how this actually works? What an ETF that's trading on an exchange versus on chain, Are those regulations and policies in place, or is that an emerging arena for these companies to navigate?
It's an evolving space. Since we've had the administration change, the climate is a lot different, right? It's much more exploratory. There's a lot of education. We spend a lot of time with the SEC task force educating them on our value prop and what we can do for these assets. I would say it's very fluid. Obviously, the Genius Bill got passed, which is a step in the right direction. There's obviously a lot more that we need to do, but now it's more of a collaborative effort, and so there's a lot more education and conversations that are happening in a positive direction. Yep. So we also have our own licenses. We recently acquired a company called Oasis Pro Markets. So we have a prime brokerage, an ATS, and a transfer license. We're also a registered investment advisor. So we have all the normal licenses you would have normally if you were working in the traditional space. We're just bridging the gap and putting things on public blockchain.
Interesting. And you mentioned before we started chatting on the interview that you come from a traditional finance background and then you came into crypto. I'm curious, what are the biggest differences of those two worlds? And do you think are they becoming more similar to one another in recent years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the convergence of TradFi and DeFi is only going to accelerate. At ONDO, we try to bring the best of TradFi, the investor protections, the transparency, the reporting into DeFi, and then we take the best of DeFi, the on-chain, the community element, and we're trying to bring that into TradFi. Everyone in TradFi now wants to offer crypto assets to their audience, and everyone in crypto now wants to offer traditional assets in their audience. So we're seeing this blending play out, day over day.
Yeah, it's certainly fascinating. I'm curious you're having conversations all the time with companies that are interested. Is there any sort of commonalities between the mindset of the people that are reaching out to you all, or the types of, is it a certain type of leader that's coming to you, or a certain type of company? What does the ideal customer look like for ONDO?
Yeah, we work with tons of different kinds of clients. So we work with a very crypto native audience. So we work with a lot of public blockchains, wallets, exchanges, market makers. And then on the TradFi side, we work very closely with a lot of asset managers. We have partnerships with BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, Wisdom Tree, Fidelity, State Street, lots of very brand name American ones. And a lot of these asset managers want to come on chain. I think there was a few watershed moments. Number one, the ETFs passed. So you saw how successful IBIT was with BlackRock. BlackRock launched BITL, which is a tokenized money market fund. Now most of the top 10 asset managers have their own version of a tokenized money market fund. So they're starting to play around, and oftentimes they come to us for both help on how to do this, how to get the distribution, and then how to educate users on the pros and the cons of using this new technology.
Yeah, that was getting into you sort of answered my next question, but it seems like there's a lot of energy in this space, a lot of people are building, and there's probably a lot of people who are going to similar potential customers saying, we can do this. When you're giving a high level overview of how you differentiate, is it the education, the thought leadership? Is it some of these baked in compliance structures you have? How would you articulate why ONDO to a potential customer?
Yeah, the whole team comes from a traditional finance background. We understand credit and market risk, so we understand and have that, in our heads as we're building out these products. We've also been a leader in the space, so we, drive the market forward. We're doing a lot of new innovative things that a lot of people are replicating, which we think is great. Obviously, it takes a lot of people to continue to move the momentum. And so we just have a really good institutional grade brand. We think very long term, and we, consider all of our partners' needs. So we kind of have the power behind what we're doing, and we've kind of demonstrated by being one of the leaders. As I mentioned, we have $1.8 billion in assets under management now. The company has only been around for 3 or 4 years, so pretty good track record. And yeah, we're excited to see the next couple of years and how they play out.
Yeah, things certainly moving quickly for you guys, your space, and in the regulatory environment. Katie Wheeler, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time at Stocktoberfest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.